Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we are back with more the Prose Edda. And we're getting deep into some of the real lore, so let's continue here. It'll be part 46. Thor reaches the stronghold of Utgarda-Loki. Thor and his companions continued on their journey, traveling until midday when they saw a fortress standing on a plain, and it was so big that in order to see over it they had to bend their necks all the way back. They approached the fortress, but the front entrance gate was shut. Thor went to the gate and tried to open it, but after struggling to open the stronghold, they finally had to squeeze between the bars. Entering in this way, they saw a large hall and approached it. The door was open, and inside they saw many people sitting on two branches. Most of them were rather large. Thor went before the king, Utgarda-Loki, and greeted him, but he took his time in noticing them. Then he said, grinning through his teeth, "News travels slowly from distant parts, but am I wrong in thinking that this little fellow is Thor the charioteer? Surely there is more to you than meets the eye. Tell me, companions, in what skills do you think you are capable of competing? No one can stay here with us who does not have some skill or knowledge greater than other men." Then he who stood at the back of the group, the one called Loki, spoke up. "I have a skill in which I am ready to be tested. No one here in this hall will prove quicker than I at eating his food." Utgarda-Loki answered, "That would be an accomplishment if you are up to it, and feats such as that will be put to the test." Next he called out to the end of the bench to the one who was called Logi, or Fire, and told him to come forward onto the floor and pit himself against Loki. Then a trough filled with meat was brought in and set on the hall floor. Loki placed himself at one end and Logi at the other. Each began to eat as fast as he could, and they met in the middle of the trough. Loki had eaten all the meat from the bones, but Logi had eaten not only the meat, but also the bones and even the trough. To everyone, it seemed as if Loki had lost the contest. Then Utgarda-Loki asked in what the youngster could compete. Thialfi replied that he would run a race against whomever Utgarda-Loki chose. Utgarda-Loki called that a fine sport, but said that Thialfi would have to be very quick if he intended to win. Utgarda-Loki made it clear that the matter would be quickly be put to the test. Next, Utgarda-Loki stood up and went outside where there was a good running course over the flat plain. He called a little fellow named Hugi to come to him and ordered him to run a race with Yalfi. They ran the first race, and Hugi was so far in the lead that he turned around at the end and faced his opponent. Then Utgarda-Loki said, Thjalfi, you will need to exert yourself more if you are to win the contest. Yet it is true that no one else has come here who seemed to me faster on his feet than you. Then they began to race for a second time. When Hugi came to the end of the course, he turned around, but Thjalfi was behind him by the distance of a long bow shot. Utgarda-Loki then said, I think Thjalfi knows how to run a good race, but I have no faith that he will win. Now comes the test. Let them run the third race. When Hugi reached the end of the race and turned around, Thjalfi had not even reached the midpoint of the course. Everyone then said that the contest was over. Utgarda-Loki asked Thor what feat he wanted to show them, as so many tales were told about his exploits. Thor answered that he would most like to pit himself against someone in drinking. Utgarda-Loki said that this contest could easily be arranged. He went into the hall and called for his cupbearer, telling him to bring the feasting horn from which his retainers usually drink. The cupbearer quickly brought the horn and placed it in Thor's hand. Then Utgarda-Loki said, It is thought that drinking from this horn is well done if it is emptied in one drink. Some drain it in two, but no one is such a small-time drinker that he cannot finish it in three. Thor eyed the horn, and it did not seem to be very large, although it was rather long. He was quite thirsty and began to drink, swallowing hugely and thinking that it would not be necessary to bend himself over the horn more than once. When he had drunk as much as he could, he bent back from the horn and looked in to see how much drink remained. It seemed to him that the level in the horn was only slightly lower than it had been before. Utgarda-Loki then said, Good drinking, although not all that much. I would not have believed it if I had been told that Thor of the Aesir would not have drunk more, but I know that you will drain it in a second drink. Thor gave no reply, but put the horn to his mouth and resolved to take a larger drink. He struggled with it as long as he could, hold his breath, and noticed that he could not lift up the bottom end of the horn as much as he would have liked. Then he lowered the horn from his mouth and looked in. It seemed to him that the level had gone down even less than it had in the first try, although there was now enough space at the top of the horn above the liquid to carry the drink without spilling it. Utgarda-Loki asked, What now, Thor? Are you going to be so brave that you will take one sip more than is good for you? It seems that if you want to take a third drink from the horn, then it will have to be the biggest. But among us here, you will not be known as great a man as the Aesir call you, unless you give a better account of yourself in other uh, contests than it seems to me you are doing in this one." Then Thor grew angry. Placing the horn to his mouth, he drank with all his might, continuing as long as he could. Then he looked into the horn, and he could see at least some difference. Then he gave the horn back and would drink no more. Utgarda-Loki said, "Clearly your strength is not as great as we thought, but will you still try your hand in other contests? It is obvious that you are not going to succeed here." Thor replied, "I will make a try at still another game, but when I was home among the Aesir, I would have found it strange if such drinks were called little. What, what sort of contest will you offer me now?" Utgarda-Loki replied, "Here among us, little boys do something that is thought a rather small matter. They lift my cat off the ground, but I would not have thought it possible to propose such a thing to Thor of the Aesir if I had not already seen that your strength is much less than I had thought." Now, a gray cat, and rather a large one, jumped out onto the floor of the hall. Thor approached it, and placing his hand under the middle of the belly, started to lift up the cat. But as much as Thor raised his hand, the cat arched its back. When Thor had reached as high as he could, one of the cat's paws was lifted off the ground. Beyond this effort, Thor could do no more. Then Utgarda-Loki said, "This contest has gone as I expected it would. The cat is rather large, whereas Thor is short and small compared to the larger men among us here." Thor replied, "Although you call me little, let someone come forward and wrestle with me. Now I am angry." Utgarda-Loki looked over the benches and replied, "Here inside I do not see any man who would find it dignified to wrestle with you." Then he went on, "But wait, first let us see. Call my nurse, the old woman Ellie, to come here and let Thor wrestle with her, and if he wants to. She has thrown to the ground men who seem to me to be no less strong than Thor." Next, an old woman walked into the hall. Utgarda-Loki said she should wrestle with Thor of the Aesir. The story is not long to tell. The match went this way. The more Thor threw his strength into the grappling, the more steadfastly she stood her ground. Then the old crone showed her skill. Thor lost his footing and the contest grew fiercer. It was not long before Thor fell to one knee. Then Utgarda-Loki intervened. He told them to stop the contest, saying that there was no need for Thor to challenge others to wrestle in his hall. By then it was late at night. Utgarda-Loki showed Thor and his companions to places on the benches, and there they were treated well for the rest of the night. Part 47. Utgarda-Loki reveals that Thor was deceived. In the morning, at first light, Thor and his companions stood up, dressed, and prepared to leave. Utgarda-Loki then came in and had a table set for them. There was no lack of hospitality as to food or drink. When they finished eating, they turned to leave. Utgarda-Loki stayed with them, accompanying them as they left the fortress. At their parting, Utgarda-Loki asked Thor how he thought the trip had gone and whether Thor had ever met a man more powerful. Thor replied that he could not deny that he had been ser- uh, seriously dishonored in their encounter. Moreover, I know that you will say that I am a person of little account, and that galls me. And Utgarda-Loki replied, now that you are out of the fortress, I will tell you the truth, for I live and am the one to decide. You will never enter it again. On my word, I can assure you that you would never have been allowed to enter if I had known in advance that you had so much power in you, because you nearly brought disaster upon us. I have tricked you with a magical shape changelings, as I did that first time when I found you in the forest. I am the one you met there. And when you tried to untie the food bag, you were unable to find where to undo it because I had fastened it with iron wire. When you next struck me 3 times with the hammer, the first time was least, yet it was so powerful that it would have killed me had it found its mark. But when you saw a flat topped mountain near my hall with 3 square-shaped valleys in it, one deeper than the others, these were the marks of your hammer. I had moved this flat topped mountain in front of your blows, but you did not see me doing it. It was the same when your companions contested with my retainers. And so it was the first contest undertaken by Loki. He was very hungry and he ate quickly, but the one called Logi was wildfire itself, and he burned the trough no less quickly than the meat. When Thjalfi ran against the one called Hugi, that was my mind, and Thjalfi could not be expected to compete with its speed. When you drank from the horn, you thought it was slow going, but on my word, that was a miracle I would never have believed could happen. The other end of the horn, which you could not see, was out in the ocean. When you came to the ocean, when you come to the ocean, you will see how much your drinking lowered it. This is now known as the tides. Utgarda-Loki had still more to say. I thought it no less a feat when you lifted the cat. Truly, all those who saw you raise one of the cat's paws off the ground grew fearful, because that cat was not what it seemed to be. It was the Midgard serpent, which encircles all lands, and from head to tail its length is just enough to round the earth. But you pulled him up so high that he almost reached the sky. It, too, was a real wonder that you remained on your feet for so long among the wrestling. You fell no more than on to one knee as you struggled with the crone Ellie, or old age. And no one accomplishes that after reaching the point where old age beckons, because no one overcomes old age. As we part, I can truthfully say that it would be better for us both if you never come again to meet me. Next time I will defend my stronghold with similar or other trickery, so that you will not get me into your power. Then Thor heard this account. He gripped his hammer and raised it into the air, but when he was ready to strike, Utgarda-Loki was nowhere to be seen. Then Thor returned to the fortress, intending to destroy it. There he saw a broad, beautiful plain, but no stronghold. Then, turning back, he journeyed until he came once again to Thrudvangar. In truth, it can be said that from then on, he was determined to find a way to confront the Midgard serpent, and later that happened. Now I believe that no one else could have given you a truer account of this journey by Thor. So yeah, Thor getting tricked by Utgarda-Loki, or as he was known earlier, Skrimir, since they are actually one and the same individual. Yeah, he couldn't drink from the horn simply because it was connected to the ocean. You know, he has the horn, you know, like this, and he's drinking from it. He's like, how is this not going down? Surely I must be an idiot. Turns out the other end, because they talk about how long it is. It's not very big, but it's long. The other end was connected to the ocean. And so Thor, no matter how much he drank, could not drink the ocean. The cat, as it's what turns out, was the actual Midgard serpent, which is so big it wraps around all the lands, which is also who Thor will have to face at Ragnarok, but that's going to be something we talk about later. And of course, the old crone is old age. No matter how hard you fight, you're not going to defeat old age. It will catch you sooner or later. And it only made Thor go down to one knee. So, yeah. Uh, and then he had the other competitions. Loki, the trickster god, himself was tricked because he thought he was eating against another giant, but it turned out to be Wildfire, who ate the trough, the meat, the bones. Yeah, you know, as wildfires tend to consume. They consume trees and animals. But uh, Thjalfi, one of Thor's other companions, tried to outrace his opponent, and turns out his opponent was just the mind, the thoughts of Utgarda-Loki. So yeah, but this is Thor's encounter with at the fortress of Utgarda-Loki. we'll go ahead and end this episode there. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next episode. Until then, later.